D&D in your therapy office? No, I actually mean that. Like, can we incorporate role-playing games into psychotherapy? Well, if you are interested in that idea, have I got the book for you? I am Dr. Jordan Soper, a board-certified behavioral and cognitive psychologist and an ASEX-certified sex therapist. Welcome back to Psych Reads, where I review different mental and sexual health books that are either my go-to reads or ones I have not yet read. This week, we are going to be reading a book by Daniel Hand, talking a little bit about role-playing games in psychotherapy, a practitioner's guide. This book talks a little bit about how to implement the theories of RPGs into the psychotherapeutic space, looking at the different theories, the different concepts, and how to apply them to different types of therapeutic modalities. And of course, we're going to be talking about CBT today. So we're going to be talking about how to incorporate role-playing games into cognitive behavioral therapy. Let's take a read, shall we? CBT, or cognitive behavioral therapy, has a primary focus on the relationship between behavior, thoughts, and emotions, has in RPG therapy an excellent means of both highlighting that relationship and modeling more constructive ways of being to counter the client's previously destructive ones. A huge benefit of RPGs from a CBT point of view is that session-to-session play is rooted in the present, with only as much consideration given to a character's backstory as the practitioner and the client choose to give. The focus may therefore remain on how to devise and implement positive change now. Following an initial assessment, during which the client may be asked to discuss the issues that trouble them, a cognitive behavioral RPG therapist would subsequently be able to put the client's character into various situations that mirror those activating or triggering events. This opens the door to in-depth exploration of the character's inferred emotions, thoughts, and behaviors, as well as a look at the cycle of how one leads to another, which leads to another, and back again. This, in turn, has the potential to prompt the client to consider their own patterns of behavior. For example, what their automatic thoughts happen to be in similar scenarios. Using the character as a third party in this guided discovery allows for somewhat clearer thinking on the matter than if the client were asked to talk exclusively about their own experiences. By being able to talk hypothetically about what the character might be thinking, the risk of the client getting caught in their own negative thought patterns is lowered. Once the characters, and by extension the clients, learned behaviors have been broken down into their component parts, the RPG may also help the client challenge those similar components. Any shoulds and musts, for example, may be identified and questioned in context, as may any hot thoughts or irrational feelings. How realistic or appropriate are they, given the character situation? How much evidence is there within the RPG scenario that would support those thoughts? And how much evidence is there that they would discredit? And if they aren't realistic or appropriate for the character in their situation, then why should they be realistic or appropriate for the client in theirs? Finally, the RPG itself provides the perfect testing ground for new patterns of thought or behavior. Having identified and challenged their characters and their own old ways of thinking, the client is now able to devise and rehearse some potentially more helpful ones, totally free of any possible repercussions. This safety means techniques may be practiced to perfection before ever having to implement them in real life, by letting the character take all the risks and the client get a glimpse of what success could look like. In addition to these in-session exercises, the creative nature of a cognitive behavioral RPG therapy allows for a wide variety of homework assignments, writing stories about the character's experiences, or letters to NPCs, illustrating their emotions, or simply pondering how an obstacle have been approached differently. All are relatively straightforward tasks, which gives the client space to practice these new ideas, as well as some self-care. So the reason I really love this chapter, as this book as well, is it's taking a concept of how do you do a modality of psychotherapy and integrate it with something that's already important to the patient themselves. This is something I try to do really regularly with my patients, is how do we have a person-centered, culturally inclusive, mindful approach to these types of treatments like cognitive behavioral therapy. So similarly, as Daniel's talking about, I will actually have some of my patients, when appropriate and when we're doing this type of therapy, I'll have them actually make up their own character sheet. I will say, what's your stat block? What do you have advantage on? What do you feel like you have disadvantage on? Looking at buffs and debuffs. Really being able to essentially roll an insight check on yourself to increase the level of awareness, the increased level of insight into your own thoughts, feelings, and behaviors, and really recognizing that you are responding to the world around you because you are a character. You're not a random NPC. You are a complex character who's got a fulfilling backstory. And in what ways is that backstory impacting your current campaign, and what do you want your future to look like? This book does a really great job of taking a different approach to psychotherapy, really looking at how to start sprinkling in and integrating RPG theory or application into an already existing modality. So if you are interested, feel free to check out this book by Daniel. He is actually a clinician out of the UK, so you may notice some of the words are written in English, in a different form of English. I always have to be mindful of when I'm saying certain things like behavior or theater. I'm like, wait, damn it. I watched a lot of British television growing up, so it is a little easier to do. So you may notice that some things are a little different spelled compared to us here in the US. Did anything surprise you? Have you ever thought about integrating some of your hobbies or interest into your psychotherapy? In what ways have you ever thought about doing that for your own patients? Feel free to put your comments down below, or even questions that you might have about how do we incorporate a little more geek therapy into our day-to-day therapy. And I'll see you next time for Psych Reads.